Alrighty everyone, how's it going? We alive, we are here, and we're here to talk about Resident Evil live action adaptations. What is exactly going wrong? What is the problem? And can we constructively dissect this and make this into an adequate discussion for the masses? Now, I'm not gonna go around and bash any actors for what they said, what they do, any directors, etc. I just want to get to the root of the problem. You know what they say in RE1, right? The root of the problem, and sort of decipher and give my 2 cents on this, because I could easily say, oh, well, these adaptations are just trash and that's it. You know, that's all I have to say, but I don't want to say that. I want to actually break down the details. First and foremost, one thing I do believe is that Capcom is very hands-off with Resident Evil live action adaptations, right? Everyone can agree with this. Every single time they license these IPs out for money, and it's really weird because the CGI RE films, they're not perfect, but they are relative to the universe, and people do love these movies a lot more than their live action affairs. What is exactly going on there that works, but it doesn't work for the other live action studios? It doesn't work for anything else related to that. For CG, it's kind of fine, except for Infinite Darkness being like way too short, but that's another topic entirely. I'm gonna get to that. I'm gonna get to Infinite Darkness in the future, don't worry. But still, for live action, why does this not migrate over? And the reason is because, like I said, Capcom is not maintaining that quality control because they're very hands-off. They want the money. If they want good Resident Evil live action adaptations, they should be hands-on. I even think the CGI movie of Biohazard 4D Executor was way better than any live action movie to date. I'm gonna make that claim, and that was just for like a fucking 3D tourist attraction ride, right? It was way better and way better handled than a lot of the live action adaptations that we see today. But I do think that the original RE1 movie from Paul Anderson, that was decent. Like, a lot of people shit on that movie, but I think that movie was entertaining, to say the least. So entertaining and having that quality control, and having Capcom supervise the damn project for once, you know what I mean? Get the damn V-bucks out of your eyes, be sure to take out those dollar signs, and wake up to reality once you finally supervise this thing and make it right. The next thing they need to do is maintain horror throughout the entire movie. So you have examples of them trying horror elements with the first Resident Evil and Welcome to Raccoon City, and then they just stop short of doing those affairs for either more action or suspense in certain scenes. And I get it, you know what I mean? Having that action maintained in certain scenes, it brings an element of drama. I like how they did it in the first RE with Paul Anderson, where they were in that sort of confined space with the zombies, and Michelle Rodriguez, she was constantly getting bit on the hand and everything. That was cool. But eventually these movies, they lose those horror elements. Like, I haven't seen a Resident Evil film where they maintain the horror throughout the entire movie. Like, every singular scene is dripping with dread around each corner. Like, we don't get that. And this series was fundamentally created on survival horror. That's the backbone of Resident Evil. It coined the term survival horror. I believe they introduced way too many elements that are far-fetched even for my normal like viewing conventions and my normal ones for a straight up Resident Evil horror movie, like Alice having psychic powers, 3,000 clones, raiding a complex, Wesker having a big tentacle mouth that's like the Plaga, but he never had that in the games. What is happening? What is going on? Like, there are those moments where you need to stick to the script, and it's just batshit insane. I personally don't mind liberties. Liberties are fine if they're done really, really well. I always say Thanos' backstory in Infinity War was infinitely better in that movie than the original comics, where he's just simping over Lady Death. This time he's like, okay, these people have drained up all these resources. Everything is going to shit. Everything is being splintered down to the last nitty detail, and all these people care about is war, 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 and I'm stuck in the middle of it. How do I balance the problem? And that was a good liberty. If you do liberties well, because once again, if they just adapt the source material and that's it, then I have a feeling that if it's a straight one for one, people are going to complain and say, oh, you've already done this before, etc. Like, what is different than the games? But at this point, the bar is so low for Resident Evil that I'm not surprised that this reaction is being said, that they want a straight one for one, because the liberties that they are taking are not really well produced. Like, I saw one clip from the Netflix show, and like I said, I vowed to not watch that show because I knew it was going to be a part of something that wasn't really meant for me. It wasn't my cup of tea. But the clip that I saw of Wesker getting shot in the head and other Weskers are running around and they're cloned, and you have one that looks like Blade, it's almost like a parody in a sense. So you have to stick to the straight up survival horror concepts. And I think one good adaptation that we were going to get before it was canceled was Arklay. Imagine that, a detective roaming around trying to figure out what is going on around the Spencer estate or whatever, trying to solve this mystery, and it ties in perfectly as a prequel or something, you know what I mean? Like a prequel story. And that's brilliant because we don't have too many detectives in Resident Evil. All we have is like cops and super soldiers. Excluding Ark Thompson because he's been regulated to I'm dead status since Resident Evil Survivor came out and never mentioned probably ever again like he ever exists, right? So you can draw from there and take good influence and make something profound. Make it a slow burn building horror story as we get introduced to like George Trevor or Spencer, right? And then they show his backstory and his history and how this house is really, really dangerous, really, really evil, right? That'd be cool. But we're not getting those unique creative ideas, so therefore the bar is gonna stay low unless they do it in a certain way. I want that. I want good creativity, good creative. I want them to draw from the well. I want them to take something unique, and I want them to maintain horror throughout the entire experience from top to bottom. I should be seeing all these completely twisted, bone-melting creatures that look wild with special effects. That's another thing too. Like, I need good CGI and practical effects if possible, because if not, I'm not gonna believe the experience. I would say practical more if need be. That's good. Like the zombies looking absolutely dreadful and real, that sucks me into the horror experience a lot. So let's move on. As I said, you could also keep pre-existing characters, but they have to be the interpretation that we got from the games. Usually they make these small little changes and adjustments that just doesn't work or pay off. One main example is when they had all the old characters in the Anderson movies, and I heard that Eventually, they kill everyone off screen. So Leon, Chris, Claire, all those people, Jill, all killed off screen. And I'm like, there's no sort of context as to why in the movies. Like, it's off screen and you really read it in the novels for a supplemental material, and it's just awful. It's just terrible. Like, give me some clarity as to why this certain event happened if you're gonna do something that bold and risky. And it just didn't pay off for me personally. If you're gonna do that to Barry, Leon, Chris, well, I think they killed Barry on screen. But for the other characters that they did murk off screen, what the fuck, man? You know what I mean? It's crazy. I want Leon to be Leon, whether it's babyface Leon from RE2 where he's a noob, and they tried that with Resident Evil 2 and Welcome to Raccoon City with very mixed and varied results, because they had very drastic sort of naivete with Leon in that movie compared to how he was in the game. And then you have other renditions where the guy in the Anderson movies, he looked like Leon, but he wasn't in the movie that much. It was Alice's party, and it's like, it's my party and I could do what I want. That's what it was. If you're gonna have these pre-existing characters, then I think one good example was Robbie Amell as Chris. He was the one I really liked the most in Welcome to Raccoon City. He felt like he was Chris the most. I had like barely any complaints about him in that film. I think just keeping that consistency would work out better for them in the long run. The fourth point, or I think I mean like 5 points at this point, but whatever the fuck, right? Our next sort of bullet point involves finding a competent director who understands Resident Evil. It's a no-brainer to me that you have to be a straight up fan. You have to be a straight up fan boy and understand RE with its entirety, deep into the trenches, understanding the lore, the characters, the backstory, the backdrop, everything. At bare minimum, at least play all of the games. Like, I'm not asking for much. Like, play all of the games, swerve your mind into this experience, and then sit down and say, hey, I think I have the skills and capability to do this. Let me pitch an idea. Because 9 times out of 10, I heard interviews where I don't even know who Johannes Roberts is, or if he is even a fan of Resident Evil. I heard Paul Anderson talk, and he said that I only played RE4 once, and that was it. So I'm gonna loosely adapt RE5 and all this other shit, and I'm gonna loosely adapt this and that, but I haven't played all of the games, right? The main point is RE4, and that's it. And I'm sure he probably played everything else after the fact, but come on, man, you gotta be a full-on fan of the series to know what you're talking about and know exactly how you put this source on screen. If you don't, then it's just a waste of time and you're making fan fiction. And this is what stuff boiled down to. Like, later on in the timeline, when people created these RE movies, like, it is so much of a delineation point that it blows my mind. And there's no semblance to anything when you really look at some of these projects, because you could tell they haven't really played any of the games with how they portray some of the characters. The portrayal is really important, and we will tell if you haven't played the games for sure. Now, I think one good director for RE, and I know I'm gonna get shit for this, but fuck it, I don't care. I am very mixed with this guy and his audience, but I listened to an interview with him talking, and I can tell you now, I think Zack Snyder, I think he would be good for a RE movie, because once again, he's passionate about zombies. I'm passionate about zombies. He talked about RE in a really great context when he was being interviewed. I don't know if I can find the video or insert it here. I'm gonna try my best to find it. So here's a slight pause.
That's good. That's a good reveal. That's strong. Well, Resident Evil, let's be honest, as a supplier of zombie material and zombie lore and zombie films and zombies in general, it has supplied us with a lot of material. So hats off to that.
Anyway, that video and what he says and how he really sees the beginning zombie of Resident Evil 1 as a masterpiece in horror storytelling, that's someone who understands it. The switch is flicked on just like that. We need people like that helming Resident Evil projects, and we know he will bring a great bar to how the cinematography is, as well as getting the premise of Resident Evil. And Zack Snyder works for Netflix, so I don't see why they just don't put 2 and 2 together and say, this guy made Dawn of the Dead remake, let's fucking get him. Right? Come on, man. Look me in the eye and tell me I'm not lying. Like, that would be great. For the final point, try not to log jam in too much lore without giving adequate time to build it up. So that was one of the main criticisms behind Welcome to Raccoon City, where they tried to log jam in Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, and ultimately it ended up being too short for his own comfort. Like, these are two very big lore driven, story driven games in between each other, and they tried to make it condensed into a 1 hour 45-minute movie. That is insane. That is insane to think about. Like, it's times where I thought, okay, maybe if they tried enough it could work, but the time is a factor, and it is important, and build up and storytelling takes time. Sometimes it's not done just putting all these sort of materials into one movie. Sometimes you got to spread it out. Like, maybe we can have a sequel and tackle this subject, but right now let's focus on people dying in a mansion. Right? It could have just been straight RE1. People dying in a mansion, big tyrant fight at the end, which was proposed. Apparently Johannes Roberts had a lot cut out, which I don't know why they did that, because if they didn't cut and rush, it could have been a better movie. Who knows? We will never see that vision. I can't tell you, but apparently they did cut a lot of stuff out, like the tyrant and everything, and that's just lame, you know. Give Resident Evil the runtime it deserves. It should be at least 2 hours, or maybe, I don't know if like 2 hours and 30 minutes is pushing it, but it does need that screen time. It does need that presence, because there is a lot of background story there, and the only way to tell it is in 2 hours. If you don't give it that, it's gonna fall apart. It's gonna fall apart. Or a TV show where you got enough time to build things up, because the process is like, depending on how many episodes you give it, it could be like maybe 8-hour episodes, and that's enough to tell like a full arc in detail. So that's it. That's what I really think in terms of the shortcomings of what they're doing with Resident Evil live action, and how I could help to sort of advise and give discussion to the things that I see going on that they could fix. I'm not sure if I mentioned it already in this video, but like I said, Capcom tends to give care and love to the CGI movies, but not to any of the live action movies. And I find that very jarring and very weird, that all these pieces to make something good, like mentioning Zack Snyder and all that, all these pieces are there to make something spectacular, and they're not hitting the right beats. That's what I think what the problem is. Hopefully in the future it gets better, and someone comes with a vision and says, hey, we want to do this, and we're very serious about this, very serious fans. And I do see the fans doing projects themselves for live action REs, and some people are liking them. So if the studios won't do it, the people are gonna do it, and so far that's been accurate. Anyway, this is Renegade Operative signing out. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed this video. Tell me what you think and what they could fix for studio mandated Resident Evil live action adaptations. Let me know in the comment section below. Like the video, share, subscribe, and I will catch you guys later. I am all over social media. Check the description. I will see you guys next time, and don't get bitten by a zombie. Take care.